The very key to life is tension. In fact, there are times and conditions when peace of mind is positively sinful. No decent person would want it. To be preoccupied with yourself, to have an untroubled heart in this world in the midst of all its wrongs and needs, to withdraw from the responsibility of bearing some share of its burdens, is to fail the very purpose of being human. Years ago, John Balderson wrote a play, which has been revised, plagiarized, and televised until it's been altered out of recognition. A man died and opened his eyes in the next world. He saw beauty and luxury beyond anything he had dreamed. In addition, every wish was granted, every want satisfied. Nothing was withheld from his desires. After a while, however, he grew restless and impatient. He said to his attendant, "I want something that I can't have without earning it." The attendant said he was sorry, but that wish was not provided for. So the man lost his temper and burst out in a most unheavenly expletive. "In that case, I don't wish to stay here. I much prefer to go to hell." Whereupon the attendant responded, "And where did you think you were, sir?" A problem-free world is a perfect formula for boredom. How meaningless to come to the banquet table of life without an appetite. I wonder sometimes if we're not on the wrong track in our frantic pursuit of happiness. $80 billion a year we spend on it, on things to do, places to go, stuff to swallow. Everything on the outside, with so very little attention to the qualities within. James Allen's book, As a Man Thinketh, has always inspired me with its clear wisdom. Allen says he's never met a person who wasn't desirous of improving his circumstances. A bigger home, a newer car, everything. And yet he's met very few who were desirous of improving themselves. A friend of mine told me recently that the biggest problem he had was that he didn't have any problems. And so right he was. So he went out and created some problems, and he's been growing ever since. That leads me to primer idea number 4. How do we continuously grow? Can we make ourselves big? For the past decade, I've been suggesting in meetings, speeches, and seminars that we tend inevitably to grow like that to which we give our attention, our admiration, and devotion. In one of the many art galleries of Europe, there's an old Greek statue of Apollo, a beautiful figure of physical perfection. Someone visiting the gallery said he didn't know which was more impressive to him, to look at the statue or to watch the crowd as they looked. Invariably, he said, everyone who stood before it began to straighten up, put back his shoulders, and stand tall. The lifting power of loftiness. I've often said if one were to become a professional golfer, he should seek out an association with Nicklaus, Trevino, Palmer, all the golf greats. And if one desired to become a professional human being, he should seek out an association with great people, via tapes, seminars, work, or however. I think that's what the Bible is mostly about from beginning to end. Little people looking up. People very much like ourselves, who one day looked up and saw greatness, and then strove to become what they saw. Dr. Alfred Whitehead said, "Education is impossible apart from the habitual vision of greatness. The height to which man grows is commensurate with his vision." Everyone, and I do mean everyone, can improve. A few years ago, while in New York, I visited with Dr. Maxwell Maltz in his home. I asked him how a man his age, so distinguished and revered, could continue on in practice. Why was he such an avid writer, especially after he had written Psycho-Cybernetics? He answered with a story about his friend, Pablo Casals, who was still living then. Casals is unquestionably the world's greatest cellist, Max affirmed. And yet, despite his age of 91 and his excellence at his skill, Casals practiced 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours a day. Dr. Maltz asked Pablo Casals why, to which Casals answered, "I think I'm making progress." Pablo Casals, J.C. Penney, Maxwell Maltz, Albert Schweitzer, any great person, never grows up or old. They just grow and grow and grow. How do our minds grow? We make our minds available to the gift. We follow the trail of a fascinating thought. We climb up the stairways of wonder. We set our minds a task too big for them to grasp. We try to do what we can't do. We wrestle with great issues and ideas. And the mind stretches and expands in that process. Without knowing it grows. That's how the mind is made. And then primer idea number 5 for success brings us to a final clue. Happiness is the indirect consequence of usefulness. There's never been any secret in the fact that work is enjoyable. Michelangelo said, "It is well with me only with a chisel in my hand." Work, all work and creative activity, carries in it some measure of pleasant compensation, partly because we are made by our Creator to be creative, and partly because occupation is 9/10 preoccupation. When we are preoccupied, we're not thinking of ourselves. I suppose that's why hobbies and happiness go well together. Here is the clue to the great secret, the small key that opens that big door. The highest human happiness is found in self-forgetting devotion to something beyond the self. You lose life to find it. You don't seek happiness at all. To get it, you have to forget it. Take no thought of it. You make yourself useful to somebody, or you pick up some creative work needing to be done. Lose yourself, forget yourself, and happiness comes out in the parenthesis. So the secret's not a hidden one, nor out of reach of anyone. Happiness is usefulness, redemptive usefulness, wholehearted devotion to those ends for which creation is working. Mature people never pursue it, seldom bother to think of it, and are strangely indifferent to the question as to whether or not they're personally happy. They're seeking something else. They're not asking, "What do I want?" but rather, "What is wanted of me?" The great people are the serving people. Dr. Kenneth MacFarland eloquently prescribes the leadership formula given to the world by Matthew. "He who would be chief or leader among you shall be the servant of all." That Jesus should be considered great or even numbered among the great is the supreme miracle of history. He, born so low, should rise so high. Born in obscurity, in a family with neither wealth nor prestige, who went to no school except the local synagogue, who traveled never more than 100 miles from home, whose public ministry lasted less than 3 years, whose recorded words can be read in an hour and a half, who was repudiated by the leaders of his people, deserted by his closest friends, and executed as a common criminal. That he should leave a mark on anyone outside the borders of that little land is more than enough evidence to the efficacy of losing oneself to a worthy cause. Some years ago, one of our best-known clinical psychologists in America, who had ignored religion, found himself coming back to it by the rediscovery of the paradox that what Jesus said about finding life by giving it was what he had been trying to say for years to his patients. He said he had learned in his own professional practice that the self-sparing life is self-defeating, and that when people try to protect themselves by withdrawing from the risks and hurts and demands of life, they invariably diminish the self they are trying to protect. He told of a young woman who came in to ask help in the simple matter of making friends. She complained that her circle of friendship was shrinking into a narrow world of loneliness. Probing back into the pattern of her life, he discovered that growing up in a comfortable home She never put herself out to mingle with people, unless she got enjoyment out of their company. She had habitually avoided doing anything she disliked. She had joined no church, no community enterprise that involved responsibility. She didn't want that. And so it happened. Not willing to put herself out for others, she found herself gradually left out by others. How often loneliness is self-inflicted. People who by their choice live to themselves are invariably left to themselves. How true it is. He that saveth his life shall lose it. The undeniable attraction to daredevils, professional athletes, and the like lies in their willingness to risk, to achieve. In A's Triplex, Robert Louis Stevenson said, "It is better to lose health like a spendthrift than to waste it like a miser. It is better to live and be done with it than to forego all the issues of living in a parlor with a well-regulated temperature." For one man who wants to be comforted, there are 100 who want to be stirred. For what man wants in the last resort is not non-involvement, but drums. Drums to sound cadence for the task. The clearest law upon which there is fundamental agreement is that this inner music of the soul, which has been named happiness, is essentially and inevitably a byproduct of usefulness to others. To pursue it, to pounce upon it, to go directly after it, is the surest way not to obtain it. People who make a mission of it miss it, and people who talk loudly about the right to be happy seldom are. It is a byproduct given to people who accept responsibility to a task. Well, these are the success primer ideas we wanted to share with you. None of these ideas are new in scope, but all are earth-shaking in perspective. We feel that as bedrock ideas, they need to be re-emphasized and stressed so all of us can reveal them in our lives. Successful living does indeed come from losing yourself in a worthy cause, realizing that school is never out, recognizing problems for what they really are, opportunities for growth, working through your real or imagined handicaps, and getting up when you're down to do it all over again. For Motivation Recordings, this is Dick Gardner.
This has been another educational cassette by Dick Gardner. For a catalog of additional sales and motivational tapes by Dick and other sales trainers, write Dick Gardner at the address found on the label of this cassette. Thank you.